And now, brothers and sisters, on this beautiful Sabbath day, we have the awesome opportunity to hear from the great Kohan, Michael Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. It is a nice Sabbath day, isn't it? It's always beautiful to be in Yahweh's great house. Let's see if you can see this. Notice what it says here. This is from Zenith. The world is seen from Rome. It says a giant is awakening. That word awakening, it's very familiar with what's going on today. You see a lot in the news referring to the uprising in the different countries as being awakenings. It says a giant is awakening. New evangelism flows out of Rome. Okay? When you think about flowing, I think about the flowing waters in Revelation. Coming out of Rome, okay? Evangelization is simply the pushing of Christianity. 33 representatives of Episcopal conferences, 400 representatives of 115 ecclesiastical groups committed to evangelization. Notice, they committed to evangelization. They committed followers. 10,000 young people ready to carry out the mission. These are the numbers revealing an army of new evangelizers who have responded to an appeal from the Pontifical Council for promoting new evangelization. Notice it's an army. They call it an army, okay? And they respond to this appeal. It's nothing more than going after the Crusades. It's a continuation of the Crusades. But that's what we want to do, is expose some truth about these things. Keep in mind, the position of a cardinal is right underneath the Pope. That's where they elect the popes from. And here is a translation of the address that Pope Benedict XVI gave to the participants for promoting new evangelism. Notice what he calls them. Lord Cardinals. Lord Cardinals. Think about all the things the pastor has been bringing out. Okay? This is the Pope addressing them. Lord Cardinals. Venerable brothers in the episcopate and the priesthood. But this word venerable, according to the American Heritage Dictionary, see if I got it. Yeah. Okay, it means, it's a word that commands respect by a position of reverence. And it's a form of address for a person who has reached the first stage of canonization. Okay? Now, to canonize means to declare a deceased person to be a saint and entitled to be fully honored as such, to treat as sacred and to glorify. To treat as sacred. Okay? Remember, sacred referring to the holiness, and ones who are holier than thou. Okay? This is their mentality and the way what they teach. But the Pope is addressing these Lord Cardinals and reminding them that they will be as saints, worshipped as the dead, the Lord Cardinals, okay? They will be venerable. They will be worshipped. They have the promise of being worshipped as these dead saints, okay, once they die. And this is the whole object that is pushed behind this thinking of exalting themselves as being holier than anybody else. Turn over to Isaiah 65. Isaiah 65. So the Pope reminds them about this. These are the ones that are holier than thou. In Isaiah 65, verses 2 through 5, Isaiah 65. The prophet spoke about these things, and even Yeshua got into it. Isaiah 65, verse 2. I have spread out my hands all the day to a rebellious people who walk in a way which is not right. It's not a righteous way, after their own thoughts. In other words, they lean on their own understanding, what they think is right, the right way to worship. Verse 3, a people who act defiantly against me to my face. They think, remember, they act defiantly. They think, as it says in verse 2, that they can actually change the laws of Yahweh, as the prophet Daniel tells us. Who sacrifice in gardens, that's the churches, the places of worship, and they burn incense on the altars of brick. Now, incense is something that's still used today in the Mass, and it's also used in ablutions or absolutions of the dead. Okay, keep that in mind. Absolutions of the dead. And these altars of brick, of course, that's forbidden in Yahweh's law, because Yahweh says, if you build an altar to me, in Exodus 25, verse 20, it says, if you build an altar to me, don't use any cut stone. If you do, it defiles the altar. Okay? But that's what they do. Verse 4. Who assemble and spend the nights, keeping memorials for the dead. Remember these venerable lords. Okay? Their worship is promised to them after they die, just as their forefathers did. In verse 4, continuing, who eats swine's flesh and the broth of abominable things. Who say, stand by yourself, separating themselves, okay, they're separatists. Do not come near me, for I am holier than you. Now, they are holier, they proclaim to be holier. Look over to Isaiah 66, verse 17. Now, I've got it on the screen there as the version is corrected, which is what I want you to look at. Because it says, they who sanctify themselves, that is, they make themselves appear holy. And they purify themselves in the gardens. That's through their religious rites that they do this. They do it in secret. Remember, sodomy itself is holy in their eyes. Following after the priest, he's the teacher, that's the one that they trust in. That's why they trusted in so many of them so many years ago and continue to do so and fall victim in horrible cases that you hear about, the abuse cases all the time. In the midst of those who eat swine's flesh, notice, there's what swine's flesh again. That which is offered to gods. Now, swine's flesh is offered to gods. It's not food. They use it as food. But swine's flesh is not considered food. Food is what we eat to keep us alive. Those things that Yahweh has says is clean and healthy for our bodies. Okay? And the rodent, or what the rodent has eaten from, all will receive the plagues caused by the bacteria, the viruses, and the other deadly parasites, including what they will fall to, the loss of their memory, says Yahweh. The loss of their memory, okay? Now notice, eating swine, turn over to Philippians chapter 3. Philippians chapter 3. And remember, this eating the swine, the reason why they push it so much is that when you eat the unclean, you actually sacrifice to God. When you eat the unclean. When you eat the clean, you sacrifice to Yahweh. And when you eat this unclean, it alters your mind. It affects your mind. Okay? And that's what we just read. When it says here about the loss of memory. Okay? In Philippians chapter 3, verse 18. For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you, even weeping. They are the enemies of the sacrifice of the Messiah, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, who glory in their shame, who set their minds on earthly things. Now notice, their God is their belly. And they set their mind on earthly things. Earthly, that's number 1919. It means worldly, physically or morally. So you're dealing with morals here. The way that their minds are on these things that affect them. The morals. The minds are on earthly, sensual things because of the abominable foods that they eat. The God of this world has blinded their minds through the eating of the unclean. And that's why the Catholic Church pushes pork so much, the swine. Now here's the news release. Okay, now this is something that the House of Yahweh has brought out years and years ago, but it was republished recently. Probably been bringing attention so that people can see that Yahweh's way is the correct way. But keep this in mind, the eating of the unclean. Crosstalk between bacteria in your gut and brain. A lot of chatter goes on inside and outside of us, but not all happens between our ears. researchers discovered that crosstalk between bacteria in our gut and our brain plays an important role in the development of psychiatric illnesses. Psychiatric illnesses. Now that's the same thing that we just seen, the curse that's mentioned in Isaiah 66 verse 7. Eat the abominations and you lose your memory. You lose the ability to control your mind. And that's why it's pushed so much. Mind-altering bugs. A new study suggests that gut bacteria can even mess with the mind, altering brain chemistry. Now one day they'll find out there's not chemistry, but it's actually electricity. But it also changes the mood and behavior of a person. So you can see why Yahweh said, and why he warned his people when he said, do not eat of the unclean. Don't even touch it. Don't even touch it, because of these bacteria and stuff that is on it can affect you in a certain way. And if you eat it, of course, you get the wrong kind of bugs inside of you, which will alter your mind. And science has proven that. Do gut bugs practice mind control? 20 years ago, people would have laughed at the suggestion that gut microbes could influence brain function. But the bacteria living in and on our bodies, remember he always says, don't touch it, or you'll receive that bad bacteria, collectively called the human microbiome, play a role in how our bodies work. Findings point to the clear effects of the microbiome on brain development and behavior. So it's a proven fact. They know it. They know that these findings that they have shows that what you eat can affect your mind. Okay? This is why Yahweh said in Deuteronomy 28, because of the wickedness that you have done in forsaking me, it will come to pass that you will have been given yourselves over. Notice, you give yourselves over. The people bring this upon themselves to curses, confusion, and rebuke. Curses, okay, confusion, the confusion of the mind, the lack of the mind, the control of the mind, in everything you put your hand to do until you are destroyed and you come to sudden ruin. Now, turn over to 2 Kings 23. 2 Kings 23. The reason for this teaching and the influence of the Roman Catholic Church, the religion of sodomites, is a cause for this. You see the influence that they had after Solomon's death. This took place in 2 Kings 23. Look and see. Remember, when Solomon built the temple, it wasn't the temple, it was the house of Yahweh. Yahweh was worshipped there. The people came to worship Yahweh. They came to learn from the priests, to worship Yahweh, to know Yahweh, to give him honor and glory. As time went on, it became known as a temple, and the people began to set up the God worship that's there. 2 Kings 23, verse 1, the king dispatched messengers to go to all the elders of Yada in Jerusalem. Okay, so he gathers the elders, the priests, the prophets of Yada in Jerusalem. Verse 2, it says that they went up to the house of Yahweh with all the men of Yada and all the people of Jerusalem, the priests, the prophets, and the people. These are the ones who were responsible for bringing forth all of this abomination throughout all the earth and spreading it. Jump down to verse 4. Then the king commanded Hilkiah, the high priest, and the priests of the second rank, and the doorkeepers, as the guards, to bring out of the house of Yahweh all the articles that were made for Baal, all the articles that were made for Asherah, all the articles that were made for the hosts of heaven. All of these things were brought into this place that was one time made for the worship of Yahweh. These men, remember, they came in by force, and they caused these things to take place. In verse 6, it says that he expelled the pagan priests that was ordained by the kings of Yada. Okay? So these were the pagan priests. These were the ones that he was talking about. Verse 6, they were not Yahweh's priests, but these were the pagan priests. Verse 6, he took the Asherah pole, the sacred pole out of the house of Yahweh and brought it to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem, and he burned it in the Kidron Valley. He got rid of the sacred pole. The sacred pole. You remember the word talking about holiness about these people, okay? They considered themselves to be holy, to be sacred, to be venerable, worthy of this worship, okay? They brought this out of the house of Yahweh. Now, when they left Jerusalem and they went to Rome, they took this sacred pole worship with them. Because you see this today in the Vatican, right in the very center is a big Asherah pole, a big obelisk. And that's where the Pope comes out and addresses all the people and teaches them how to be sodomites. I mean, how to be Catholics, okay? How to be, how to learn the catechism, okay? That word just pops out. Okay, in verse 7 here. He tore down the houses of the Kedoshim. Notice, these are the men that's practicing sodomy and prostitution in religious rites. That shows that this was a part of this religion, okay? These are the separated ones. These are the ones who are holier than thou. These were in the house of Yahweh where the women wove their houses for Asherah. All of these things were mixed up in there. Now keep in mind that the book of Revelation calls Babylon as being a mystery religion. The word mystery, number 3466, and it means a hidden or secret thing. It's not obvious to the understanding. It's a hidden purpose or counsel. And that's what they do. It's hidden. Their counsel is hidden from the public's eyes. Now remember, it's this evil system that Yahweh condemns. It's not the Catholics themselves. They're ignorant. They don't even know what they worship. All right? So it's not them, but those in hierarchy know. Okay? And that's the ones that Yahweh come against. Open to Yada, chapter 1. Yada, chapter 1. Remember, it's the hierarchy. They're the ones that's holier than thou. Okay? In Yada, chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. Yada, chapter 1, verse 18 and 19. Yada, chapter 1, verse 18 and 19. It says, "For they said to you that there would be scoffers in the last days, who would walk according to their own unholy lust." Okay? Their own unholy lust. These who walk according to their own unholy lust are the ones who separate themselves. You see that? They separate themselves. They call them natural brute beasts, you know? Not having the Spirit, not having the law of Yahweh. No, they do away with the law of Yahweh. They teach not to keep the laws of Yahweh. They teach you to eat the unclean. They teach you not to call upon Yahweh, but to call upon the Lord. Make yourself into a God. Make yourself into a Lord. That's their object, is to keep people away from finding salvation. This fits in with their past history. In their past history here, this is from the New Catholic Encyclopedia. I love this encyclopedia. It's full of so many things that condemn them. Pharisees, of course, you read them, a lot of the big articles, it's like you read them, by the time you get to the end of the article, you think, what's this even talking about? It's a bunch of garbage. It makes no sense, but it looks very impressive to the people. That's why they do it. The Pharisees consequently found their main function in teaching and preaching. Okay, now remember, Yeshua said they sit in the seat of Moshe. Okay, listen to them, to the law, but don't practice what they do. The Pharisees consequently found their main function in teaching and preaching. Their work was chiefly connected with the synagogues, so the religious practices. And they embraced the schooling of children, the orphanages. They love those children. And missionary efforts among the heathen tribes. Of course, that's what they did in their attempts to destroy the Galileans, right? Thus, in a sense, Pharisaism helped to clear the ground and prepare the way for Christianity. Okay? Prepare the way for Christianity, which was eventually came about as the, JC was made. Now, notice, the schooling of children. The word origin and history on the online etymological dictionary, under the word kindergarten, It's a German word, kindergarten, and it means children's garden, okay, or garden of children. The first one in English was established in 1850 by a German priest, a German Catholic priest. Okay? Isn't that interesting? Well, one such German Catholic priest became a pope and took on the name Benedict. The online etymological dictionary says Benedict refers to a third of the four lesser orders of the Roman Catholic Church, one of whose functions was to exorcise spirits. Exorcise spirits. Now, we used to think, when you exorcise a spirit, you get rid of them, right? The American Heritage Dictionary, the word history on the word exercise, says our word exercise is first recorded in English before the beginning of the 15th century. And in this use, exorcist means to call up or conjure spirits rather than to drive them out. So when you exercise, you actually call them to you. Okay? That was the first use of the word. Keep that in mind when you read, and keep in mind all that we talked about. Okay? When you read here in the Keys of This Blood on page 632, the incident of satanic pedophilia, rites and practices, which means it's a religion, was already documented among certain bishops and priests as widely dispersed in Italy and in the United States. The cultic acts of satanic pedophilia was considered by professionals to be the culmination of the fallen archangel's rites. Remember, they loved the orphanages, they loved the children, the schooling of the children. Keep in mind, in Revelation 18:2, it says that Babylon is fallen and become the habitations of the demons and the hold of every foul spirit. Spirit, remember what we talked about? To exercise was to conjure them up, right? Babylon is known as the mystery religion. Mystery is number 3466. It means a secret or a mystery, through the idea of silence imposed by initiation into religious rites. Now remember what we just read here, that this pedophilia was rites and practices of the church. Turn over to Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11. The prophets knew about this church problem. You know, even Yeshua knew about the church problem. In Matthew chapter 11, the apostles wrote about it. And in Matthew 11, Yeshua speaks about it. Matthew 11, look at verse 7. Matthew 11, verse 7 and 8. Matthew 11, verse 7. Now when they had left, Yeshua began to speak to the multitudes concerning Yokdan. What did you go out in the wilderness to see? A flimsy reed quaking in the wind? But what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothing? Behold, those who wear fine clothing are in kings' houses. Certain words I want you to think about. The word dressed, it means to enrobe, which means to wear a robe. You know, in the late 4th century, it was against the law for a man to wear trousers in the sacred city of Rome. Okay? Fine clothing. In the King James, it uses the word soft raiment, but that word in Thayer's is number 3120. I want you to write that down and look it up yourself. 3120 because it means to be soft to the touch, but it also means effeminate. Okay? Effeminate, and it has other meanings. Look it up. 3120. Look it up in Thayer's if you have it. But it's what the orphans were subjected to. Okay? As young boys. And it refers to homosexuals. It refers to sodomites. Now there's a reference notes in 1 Corinthians 7 verse 9 that tells you what the words are. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 9. Okay? The word king is Thayer's 935. It means leader of the people. A prince, a commander, a lord, a king, making you think about the lords, the kings of the east, the rabbis, the dead rabbis that are worshipped. Now remember, the Pope said Lord Cardinals. Remember his address to them, the Lord Cardinals, the lords of the land. So he acknowledged it. The word houses is 3624. It means all the persons forming one family. Now remember, Yahweh's only dealing with the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? Stock, family, or descendants of one. Now, Yeshua said, hey, you say you're of Abraham's lineage. You're Abraham's children, but you don't do the things that Abraham teaches. You don't do his works. One family. Okay, keep that in mind, because here's a quote. John Paul II insisted on the fact that the United Nations must be a place where nations recognize one another as members of a family. Of a family. Now, let me read you the corrected version here in Matthew 11, verse 8. What did you go out to see? A homosexual dressed in some soft priestly robe? Behold, those who are effeminate queers wearing soft robes are in the Lord's family, not in Yahweh's family. Now, that's the Okie version, but you get the point, right? So, in Luke 7:25, there's another reference there, Luke 7:25. Now, I want to cover this quickly, too, because remember a pastor made mention not too long ago, about the presidents, and he said every president was a Catholic whether they admitted it or not. The New Advent Catholic Encyclopedia, it talks about this. It says, this is on the word Christian democracy. It says, what Christian democracy was authoritatively laid down, wherein is declared to be the same as popular Catholic action. You used to hear that years ago, too, about that Catholic action, but you don't hear it much now. Catholic, and therefore Christian through and through, signifies that this organized action in favor of the people is the work of Catholics. As such, popular Catholic action therefore means that the scope mapped out for the activity of the organization is the well-being of the people, and that the movement proceeds along Catholic lines under the guidance of Catholic leaders. Having noted this, it is easy to understand the existence of Christian democracy is not a thing of yesterday. Now, it's not a thing of yesterday, okay? It's something that is continually, has been going on since the beginning. As soon, therefore, as political and social circumstances allowed it, the church set her hand to this work, and she continued without interruption her traditional action in behalf of the people. To prove this, there is no need of distorting the facts of history. Even if we conclude the marvelous economic organization of the church, it is certain that from the time of Constantine, remember it was by democratic vote that he made Jesus Christ the national God, the church began the practical work of Christian democracy when the clergy showed their zeal in establishing hospices for orphans for the purpose of pedophilia, emphasis mine. This was the reason why they're so involved in these things and why they push this education on the people. You know, Yahweh, of course, allowed that to be in his plan because it was all according to the corruption of man. But at the same time, he also showed that, you know, it's possible that mankind can come out of this. We don't have to be a part of this. And that's what the deliverance is going to be. When Babylon is completely humbled and has fallen, then Yahweh will show his honor and his glory, and it will no longer be, as it says in the prophets in Isaiah, no longer be a Canaanite, no longer a God worship that will influence and corrupt the hearts and the minds of the people. Everyone will be delivered at that time, and Yahweh's kingdom will be set up. May Yahweh bless your understanding. At this time, everybody please stand. I'll turn it over to the great behind the front.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. We've got another news video, and as you watch this, take notes because it ties into what the pastor was bringing out during the feast and what he's bringing out in the last few weeks, and also what he's going to bring out today. And so tie that together. It's basically the times that we're living in. Praise Yahweh.
Pay close attention. What you are seeing today is fulfilling Bible prophecy. We started our news today seeing more countries in financial troubles. In fact, we're seeing European countries struggling to find unity in their governments and produce fair living standards to support their nation's populations. Greece is one such country. Now, once seen as a beautiful Mediterranean vacation spot known for its historical Greek architecture, this country is now in deep debt. Having spent more than it has brought in over the past years, Greece has few choices to fix its financial problems. Now, in order to remain a member of the EU, it must push through a deal offered by the EU to pay off a reduced debt. Along with this reduction comes more austerity measure to be enforced upon the Greeks. Now, what have past austerity measures done already? Well, according to an article in The Guardian, a year of wage and pension cuts, benefit losses, and tax increases have taken its toll. Almost a quarter of the population now live below the poverty line, and unemployment is at a record 16%. And as an economy contracts for the third year, economists estimate that about 100,000 businesses have closed. Now, more austerity would mean no more early retirement, reduced pay for public workers, the ones who manage to keep their jobs, and large-scale cuts to social programs, and a staggered repayment of the reduced debt. Now, Prime Minister George Papandreou, not wanting to take the blame for accepting such a deal, tried to hold a referendum in which the Greeks themselves would vote for or against the EU's bailout package. This referendum failed to go to the voters when Papandreou was pressured by high-ranking Greek politicians and EU leaders to drop it because it could have led the country to default on their loans, setting the trend for other countries like Spain, Portugal, Ireland, and even Italy. While defaulting would greatly lessen the individual country's financial problems, it would create a domino effect of economic failure throughout the European banks and affect the world economy drastically. Now, one thing is clear to see, that none of these countries have answers that are looking out for the best interests of their people. Their solutions serve the rich and powerful, but not the average person whose life is spent actually supporting that government. Now, as Papandreou's future in Greece looks bleak, a new prime minister will face the same unpopular decisions, yet none of their efforts will lead to a truly fair, peaceful solution for Greece or any of European citizens.
You know, that's interesting that the economic hardships of a country also affect the families on an individual scale. You know, it was interesting. Twice before, in 1926 and in 1989, Greece pushed for a unity government that they also call an ecumenical government.
Ecumenical, you mean dealing with the church?
Dealing with the church, the Roman Empire specifically.
So the Roman Catholic Church.
That's right. That's right. So we can see who's behind these governments pushing them in a certain direction.
And you know what's interesting, Katan, is that the burden is always placed back on the working class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ones who contribute the least to this problem suffer the most.
That's right.
Mm. Did you know that the average 4-year college tuition fee is $32,000 a year?
$32,000.
That's right, $32,000 a year. And people who are paying this are the ones who are trying to have a better life for themselves and their families. The question that we ask tonight is, where is the middle class going? Touted as the American dream. You go to college, you get a degree, you find the perfect job, and then you live the life of your dreams. But what occurs when that bubble of empty prosperity bursts? No work, no money. Well, no money equals no food, clothing, or shelter. One particular family in Greensboro, North Carolina, as reported by CBS, is a representation of a growing trend of college degree holders now holding a place in the unemployment line. And before I continue, it's noted that this couple, 2 college degree holders, had a combined income of only $85,000 a year.
So a combined income of $85,000 a year. So that's less than $43,000 each of them making. And now you're saying that they're in the unemployment line.
Yes, at least one of them is. The wife is working a job as a teacher, and she's only making about $22,000 a year.
$22,000 a year as a teacher.
Yeah, don't forget that the average fee for college tuition is $32,000.
$32,000 doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't. This is why people go deeper and deeper in debt every year. In fact, poverty in America is on the rise. According to a 2010 census, poverty is at its highest that it's ever been in the 51 years of record keeping. 1 in 7 Americans is in poverty. That is 43.6 million. Actually, it's more like 50 plus million Americans, according to a study that came after the census. 31 out of 50 states have levels of poverty that's on the rise continually. Again, Yisrayl Hawkins has been warning us that this system called Nimrod, that's of the people and by the people, what it's going to actually bring upon itself.
Well, we're seeing the results of this system. Everybody's going in debt. This middle class is diminishing. They're actually slipping down a class. And, that debt is on the rise, as we saw with the Greek. But, Katan, this next article brings us from the suffering of poverty to the suffering of war. We're talking about child Holocaust survivors. And in fact, a project to identify child survivors of the Holocaust has been recently launched. Now, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is asking for the public's help in identifying photos of 1,100 children, some of just the tens of thousands of children that found themselves alone and scattered across Europe at the end of World War II. Now, the images found on the museum's Remember Me website are of Jewish and non-Jewish children whose photos were taken by relief agencies in displaced persons camps and children's homes and elsewhere after the war. Now, the museum also plans to publish many of the images in newspapers and online forums around the country. And several of the photos have already been identified. In fact, one man, Albert Reingerwitz, came across his own picture on the website. Now, he was 11 years old at the time his picture was taken, and that was at a French orphanage in 1947. Now, after the war, Albert was adopted by an American family, even though he hoped his real family would come back for him. Now, he recently learned that after his parents were arrested in 1942, his mother had been sent straight to the gas chambers, and his father lasted only 4 months at Auschwitz. Albert still wakes up at night with horrifying memories of his tragic childhood. Now remember, this was 65 years ago for this man. Wow. Now, Dr. Lisa Yavni, the director of the museum's Survivors and Victims Resource Center, had this to say. She said, the numbers of even the youngest of the survivors and eyewitnesses of the Nazi era are dwindling, making it crucial to capture their testimonies as soon as possible. By doing so, we will record and memorialize these experiences for future generations. And Katan, that's all great to remember, but what we need to do is fix the problem that actually led to this, the Holocaust that took place so many years ago. And in fact, if you think about it, it really wasn't that many years ago that this took place. You still have people alive that were alive. And these children, those that are finding and actually seeing some of their own pictures on the website, they're bringing this testimony of what they went through. Now, in looking at this research a little bit about the Holocaust survivors, it's estimated that 1.5 million children were murdered in the Holocaust. 1.5 million. And these 1,100 children who have their photograph on the Remember Me website, it's just a fraction, of those that were left after the war with no parents.
Just a generation ago.
Not that long ago.
Wow. Well, that's interesting how many people who were wiped out or killed, murdered during that time period of World War II, and the things that people are looking to do as we move forward into the future. In fact, many people are saying that we have too many people on our planet. In a recent radio interview on August 11th, 2011 with Barry Lynn, and Alexandra Paul stated that the population needs to be stabilized and that the numbers of our current population need to go back to 2 billion people.
I think think the word control scares people. I prefer the word stabilization, population stabilization, and then lowering the population, because I actually believe that the number of people on the planet is too high, and we need to go back to 2 billion people on the planet. But we can talk about that later.
Sure.
We need to go back to 2 billion people on the planet. We need to go back to 2 billion people on the planet.
42 years ago, the population was about 3 billion people. Now it stands at a little over 7 billion. Now, a statement like this, it might sound a bit bold, and it might be a little shocking to some, but Yisrayl Hawkins has been foretelling this for decades now. There have been many speculations as to how an endeavor of this magnitude would take place. Some say abortions, while others say forced sterilization. The scriptures actually show that it will come about through nuclear wars that will start in and around the great river Euphrates. Now that will kill a third part of man and that fourth part of the earth. But it's not going to stop there, Jeff. It's going to continue on until 4/5 of the earth's population is totally wiped off the face of the earth.
Wow. 4/5.
Right.
And that's going to leave that 2 billion that Yisrayl Hawkins has been saying for all these years.
Right, right. The scriptures actually foretold these things thousands of years ago, and mankind is going to see what his ways are doing, and following this broken system is going to actually bring about this great destruction. And very soon now.
And we're seeing, even in all these news articles, we're seeing what man's ways are bringing upon this earth already. The debt, the suffering, and so forth.
Right, right. It's definitely a system that's broken. It's definitely a system that's broken, but the scriptures actually show how to fix it. Since the mid-70s, in fact, Yisrayl Hawkins brought out in his book, The Mark of the Beast, there's 2 volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and he shows that man's sins bring about the confusion that brings about diseases, famines, defilement of the earth, and of course mankind and the animals, and finally wars that maim, orphan, widow, and murder. Now the ways of Cain, in other words, this system that we see right now and today all over throughout the world, will be made evident to everyone on the earth as it collapses in on itself. Interesting.
Well, speaking of war, Katan, that leads us to our last article here, and that is the recent death of Muammar Gaddafi. And in fact, by now, of course, most of the world has heard that the Libyan leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, was killed by the National Liberation Army on October 20th of this year. Now, in past years, the ties between Libya and the Western world, they had actually greatly improved. But recently, the Libyan leader, he was viewed more as a vicious enemy than a friend. Earlier this year, NATO forces launched military operations against Libya. And since that time, Libya has been in turmoil, and fighting has taken place heavily throughout the country. Now, many amateur videos, like the one you're about to see, taken with cell phones, are now surfacing showing the extreme brutality Gaddafi went through before he was murdered. Such brutality included being slapped and beat in the face repeatedly until covered in blood, and even being sodomized by the rebel forces before being shot in the head. Take a look at this. Now, praises of Muammar Gaddafi's death are coming from some very prominent political figures. In fact, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had a good old time on Thursday when she found out that Libyan dictator Colonel Muammar Gaddafi had died. And her reaction to the news and confirmation of Gaddafi's death was captured on video.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died. We came, we saw, he died.
You heard Clinton proclaim, "We came, we saw, he died." For those of you who have not recently studied up on your Roman history, that's a reference to Julius Caesar's famous line, "Veni, vidi, vici," which means, "I came, I saw, I conquered." Katana shows you what that system is all about.
That's amazing. The people that we have in office, in our political offices, actually have such a great dislike towards their fellow neighbors. And we're seeing things go down economically. We're seeing the wars increase. We're seeing actually Bible prophecy coming to pass on a daily basis. And it's amazing that these statements are made.
Well, you know what Hillary Clinton did in her laughing, it actually reminds us of the scripture in Matthew 24, verse 12. And this is something that our Savior said that we would see in these last days. Speaking of our very time period right now, He said that because iniquity will abound, and remember, this is the pushing aside of Yahweh's laws, the things we're actually supposed to be keeping that would bring peace to this earth and solve these problems. And this is exactly what Yisrayl Hawkins has been teaching since the establishment of the House of Yahweh. He's been teaching that we need to get back to these laws, and they're going to solve all these problems. But the Savior said, because iniquity will abound, that the love of many will grow cold. And that's what you see. You see the love growing cold and people treating other people in, just heinous ways.
Looks like the only way we can fix it is to get back to the basic laws.
That's right.
The basic laws of life and the laws that teach true love.
True love, the love for our neighbor, that's going to stop these wars and fightings, and it's actually going to stop all these diseases and curses that mankind is suffering from.
And I look forward to that, that's for sure.
Well, for YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katana Alexander.
Join us next week as we continue bringing you news showing Bible prophecy is being fulfilled.
Okay, everyone please stand for the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan, Yisrayl Hawkins!
Hello, everyone! May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. Right, looks like everybody came back and we're starting to feast again. Got a crowd here today. Cold outside. Praise Yahweh. The article there on the 2 billion people, I guess you got that this week. I thought you got it last week. But come to find out it wasn't played last week, and I was thinking it was, and that's the reason I was saying, talking about that 2 billion people left alive. And don't forget who said that first now. Yahweh showed you that first, and now it looks like their plans are coming through. And what I want you to understand is that this is actually shown in the Holy Scriptures, and the work that they are doing and the work that we're doing, the work that they're doing right now is to try to straighten out the mess they've made. And of course, the work that Yahweh did through His prophets actually foretold this now in advance to you, so you would know His plan that He is bringing forth at this time through Yahshua and the branch and the donkeys. And of course, He's prophesied every move so you could see exactly what's taking place. Now, we are making headways in the education Yahweh's way, in the education of the holiness. It's if you could get this in your mind, like for instance where Yahshua was crowned. says he made a crown and put on his head. Actually, that is made a crown and put in his head, like he's placing in the heads of every one of you at this time, making him fit for the job, bringing him forth from the 12 tribes, of course, bringing Yahshua forth in that DNA breeding program that he had, to where Yahshua would be sinless, and then, of course, he would. That crown shows that he was sinless. He received a staff, a scepter, a rod of chastisement, a rod of correction, which wasn't a rod, a physical rod, neither a physical crown any more than the physical crown, but the crown of righteousness describes him and proves that he is capable of bringing peace to the universe through the rest of the priesthood that Yahweh puts with him. He's will be the King of Kings and ruler of rulers. There will be many rulers. There will be many kings throughout the universe, but they will all have proved themselves like Yahshua did. So keep that in mind as you see these things. But now, one thing that we'll see here in Scripture, of course, is the people turning to Yahweh. 2 billion people turning to Yahweh, and we see this now. We see it taking place, but in a kind of a secret sort of manner. People call us secretly. They want to be a part of the house, but they are afraid to do so at this time. There's no telling how many million people right here in the United States, and we're reaching the world. We're praise Yahweh. On the report I got today, we reached over 2 million people in the last week. 2 million new people now in just a week's time. But I don't know if you're keeping up on the education bills that are being passed to teach adultery, fornication, sodomy, bestiality in the schools to as low as the 5th grade. Now that's what they're teaching. And they're teaching the how to do it, everything. It's all put in their minds, and of course, whichever way you swing, whether the teacher swings, whether she or he is a queer or not, that's the direction they're going to point the children in whatever they believe. And it seems like the world is being taken over by homosexuals and lesbians. And that's what it seems like now. They have a huge power, like a voting power. So they can almost swing the pendulum from one president to the other, or one elected official to the other, and say who is to be in office. Well, if you're homosexual, of course they're going to want you as a front runner, and they're going to put all their votes behind you, and because they're wanting to make everyone on earth what they are. Well, the sex education in Wisconsin, that's where the biggest the biggest arguments are being played right now among the schools. But we have I noticed this week, we have a bunch of parents that are in opposition to this bill. Well, whether they know it or not, they're standing up for Yahweh's righteousness here when they stand up against this sort of thing being taught to the children. Now, Yahweh tells you what to teach your children, and of course it's not. He tells you it's not to do these things. That's what you are to teach them. And to teach them to practice the ways of righteousness only, not even partake one bit, he says, in the other, because when you partake of these things that the world is wanting you to partake of, then dying you will die, because you start putting things into your mind and you become like this person that's laughing because a man got killed. You know, this is you saw that, right, everybody? You know, it's hard for me to believe that somebody would want to hurt someone else, but to laugh about somebody's death, you know, as if it was a comedy thing that was taking place, and to do what they did to that man's body. This shows the sickness in the minds today. Now, if you want to be that way, then you can follow Satan in her education, and she'll be glad to train you on how to screw up your mind to where you'll be hating everybody on earth, just like Hillary. You know, Hill means promotion. The other part means gods. If you want to look that up, you can, but the war gods, it has to do with war gods. Promotion of war gods is that person's name. That's what it stands for. Anyway, there's people rising up against it, which lets me know that they are hearing Yahweh's righteousness taught, and they're leaning in that direction right now. If you go over to Malachi now, we will start here again, and we haven't nearly covered all of this. We've scratched the surface on the donkey's work in the last days, Yeshua's work in the last days. But the prophecies are extreme, and of course you can read one verse and miss 20 prophecies in that one verse by not associating it with the other scriptures that it's pointing out to us. But in Malachi here, chapter 3 and verse 9, we see that you're cursed with a curse. You cursed with a curse. But if you read it like it's in Hebrew, it's you cursed with curse. So it's like dying, you will die, but if you read it without all the added words, you curse with curse. And of course, it says, yes, we added that, this whole nation, and it actually means there, and should have been, all nations, but also this refers to the universe according to the lexicons. The nation there, of course, means heathen. The word Gentile means heathen, and of course, they have the people's minds screwed up today with deceptions with the words Jew and Gentile, as if they're two different races of people. So you have to put that back together in order to understand what they're meaning. They are two different peoples. One of them are believers, the other are disbelievers. That's what makes a heathen. It makes no difference what geographical location you are on earth, you know. You're still classified by the prophets as either a believer or a non-believer. And there was a lot of believers that were killed. Believers, somewhat. They weren't the house of Yahweh. They did not have salvation. You saw some of these in the film of the Holocaust. And now get this in your mind. Don't think that it was, thousands of years ago when this took place. If you notice the date that was given there in that film, 1942, that's not very far past your birth. You remember when your birth took place? Add it up and see how many years that took place when Satan had Hitler as a leader doing the bidding of the Catholic Church. And of course he was killing these people and they were fleeing, and they're finding some of these people now. And but that 1942, I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old. I lived through that. 1942, I remember that time period. I remember people in those wars coming back with missing legs, friends of mine, missing legs and arms, injured from the war. But 1942, the other date they gave, I think I was 11 years old at that time. But when Satan was trying to kill me in Europe, in Germany, when she had Mussolini trying to hunt me down and kill me, I was in Oklahoma covered with dust from dust storms. Did you see that dust storm? Was that shown today? Was not? No? Okay. Next week? Okay, next week you'll see. I remember in this time period now they're talking about here, 42, 8 years old. I was in the second grade. 11 years old. What grade would that put me in? You see what I'm talking about? And these dust storms, I can remember being in school and a dust storm coming and the teacher saying, "Get your books and get out to the bus in a hurry." Well, they knew what was going to take place. Now, that was when we stopped the country school business and we started busing the children from the rural to the city to get them better educated, get higher education. Ours only went to the 8th grade, I believe, in the country school, but they could educate you in the city and then give you a job to work for the big corporations, where you would spend all of your entire life working for this goofy thing that plays out after you get it paid for or falls apart. Well, that's the education. But anyway, I remember being in school and the teacher would rush us outside, get us on the school bus, and lo and behold, it seemed like in a few seconds, everything was pitch black. And without a light, you couldn't see your hand in front of you. And they would take us home on the bus. And the bus would drive real slow because he couldn't see anything but dust. It was pitch black. Well, what was Yahweh protecting me from? I don't know at the time. It could have been most anything, but no one was interested in coming to Oklahoma to kill me. They didn't think anybody would live there. That was a God-forsaken country. The war gods were in Europe killing these people, and some of them survived, and they're tracing them down, and they're finding some of the children that are left alive, but remember some of the things. Well, this is the curse that Yahweh is speaking of here. Is speaking of a curse that comes because the word of Yahweh is not taught. There's no one to teach it. There's no support for the work of Yahweh. If you put a king in office or a government, it makes no difference what government, they take the money, so much of the money away from the people that they can't pay their tithe. Now, either they pay their taxes or they go to jail. So which one do you think they're going to pay? Yahweh's not going to put them in jail. So they withhold money from Yahweh's teachings here, from His house, which keeps the house from publishing Yahweh's laws that would keep them from going into this mess that they're in. And if you remember what Samuel told the 12 tribes when they said, "We want a king like all the other heathen around us. We want a king." And Samuel said, "Well, you can have the king, but this is what is going to take place. He's going to rob you blind. He's going to take everything from you, and you're going to be crying because of your oppression." Well, of course, that's what the people are in an uproar now, and you see it. Greece, that's just one place, but it's here in the United States. They said in Egypt when they was rejecting or trying to get rid of the king. We want democracy. What are they saying here in New York? They want democracy like New York? like California? If we have it like California, we'll be great. We'll be rich. Well, the people there don't think so. The people in New York are not thinking so. And they're showing now, I don't know if it was shown here, but they're showing where the people are revolting now, where the revolutions are starting. This is just a start. And they know this, and they have concentration camps set up for this very reason. You remember we were hearing for months and months that they were building concentration camps. Brown and Root, which used to do offshore drilling, they still do, owned by Dick Cheney. Remember that? Well, they got the biggest contracts for building concentration camps throughout the United States. Well, they got them set up and ready. So they're thinking ahead of the world. The world will get caught up in this later, and they'll see what actually took place to them because they are under a king instead of a righteous priest of Yahweh. Now that's what the difference is. And the curse that they're under, Samuel tried to get them not to do it, and Yahweh said, protest it, but just calmly protested. Tell them what they're getting into, but let them go ahead and do it. Well, that was the plan from the beginning when Yahweh created heaven and earth to allow this to take place. And he says here, you're under a curse, even this whole nation, the universe too, because Yahweh intends to bring peace to the universe, which means their peace is not in the universe at this time. He says, because you have robbed me, you're suffering this curse. Well, if you look back now to, he was speaking here of what we're shown in Genesis 49. We're shown the curse here, taking that Yahweh says, these people, he said, Ephraim and Manasseh, they're going to become a multitude of nations. They're going to take over the entire world. And from these families right here, in the last days, you're going to see this curse. And then he starts naming you the curses here. For the last days now, verse 1, then he starts showing you the curses you will see. Look at verse 7 there. Now this is what you're seeing among the nations right now. This is why people will laugh when they see someone's body brutalized, even after he's dead, and laugh about it. Makes me wonder, well, I won't go any further on that one. Anyway, the 49 here and the 12 sons, and we see there, of course, in 10 and 11, and 12, also the work that Yeshua was trained to do for these last days. Now, this is the first prophecy of it, and there's no way anyone can understand it without knowing the other prophecies that go with it, which you do. At least you know most of them, because I brought most of them, not nearly all of them, but I brought most of them. But we have 4 horns here, and we also have 4 great powers bringing this curse about in these last days. Their end is shown, held back from their intentions, because if their intentions, let's turn over to chapter 7 of Revelation. If their intentions were right, he didn't show the horns now until he got to Moshe. And he showed the altar of death that represents sin, and of course the slaughter of the 4/5 of the earth's population in these last days. is brought forth by these four powers here. But he shows their intentions of depopulating the earth to 2 billion people. Now, everybody saw and heard that. So you know before this that I told you this was going to take place. Well, here in chapter 7, we see the four. Now, remember, this is represented by an altar that Yahweh showed Moshe that still sits beside his throne. This was a pattern of something that Yahweh has setting beside his throne where he can see this, like I told you to do with the mule, the donkey cloud. I think about that donkey cloud, and I think what Yeshua was showing there, that my work is not in vain as I thought it was. And I did have great grief because I couldn't see things taking place as I thought they should. And I know that Yahweh showed me this for a reason, and it couldn't be more clear than it is that donkey, that the branch has its full attention, as I do today. And then of course we see the news articles that is showing a movement in the world of people bucking up against this, what is taught to their children. Yesterday they dismissed a judge because he was spanking his 15-year-old daughter. And I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that said the judge is right in this matter in what he did and shouldn't have been dismissed. He should have been encouraged. But I don't know, people today, they have a hard time even seeing one righteous thing. And of course, the 15-year-old girl, I don't know what all took place in that, but I would think that this judge, from seeing the video, was doing what he thought was a righteous thing in trying to keep his daughter from probably sins. And I doubt if any of this will be brought out, that he was doing this, but he was perfectly right, and the world is perfectly wrong in saying we shouldn't attack sin in our children. We should let our young children who don't have the knowledge, who doesn't have knowledge enough to know what they're getting their bodies into. And of course, the Catholic Church is working with Satan in wanting this freedom and bringing forth the chip freedom and punishing with their CPS department anyone who will correct their children and insist on them not doing these things that they are teaching in the schools. And of course, the parents arguing against this, he probably won't last long. They'll probably, take him out of office and turn his daughter loose to go ahead and ruin her body. But that's the world. But you can see people and judges. We had one judge that said, all of my life, ever since I've been a judge, I've just put people in prison because he said, I knew it wasn't helping anyone, but he said, I don't know what else to do. I didn't know what else to do. He said, I'm so glad, even after my term, I've retired. He said, I'm glad to find out there was something that I could have done, and maybe I can help now to start it in the world today. Y'all remember that man? A judge who is now pushing forth the Peaceful Solution character education program. They don't want this in their schools. In fact, Yahweh is not wanted here now. Yahweh is going to be wanted here very soon, and we can see it coming now. Well, we saw we see here that Yahweh is holding back in chapter 7 now, of verse 1, holding back these 4 horns of death that would wipe out 4/5 of the earth's population, and he's holding them back for the reason of converting certain people and certain breeds here, in fact, that he shows, if we had the correct translation for it. And then if you go back to chapter 6 there, you see the 4 that he's holding back. Now these are represented by the 4 horns that Yahshua is going to cut off and throw to the ground. That's the 4 horns of death that the altar was made to represent death caused by sin. Well, here in chapter 6 and verse 1, we see the Lamb here now. The Lamb is the one that's portrayed in chapter 49 of Genesis as doing a work in the last days with the donkeys. Remember? Well, we see a lamb now here opening some seals. What for? Why? I would that I could have told my brother-in-law, that the Lamb is going to open his mind one day and show him what he could have got if he'd have listened to me when I was 17 years old. But he got mad at me then. Closed his Bible and threw it against the wall, in fact. He was a free will Baptist. He was one of those free people that the Pope set free from righteousness. And I saw when the Lamb, opened the seals, and then I heard, as it were, one of the 4 living, that's the 4 active powers, or one of the 4 horns. 4 power, 4 represented by 4 horns, shown in Daniel as being 4 great major powers, combining their strength and coming down today with great fury, led by Satan. But he was saying with a voice like thunder, a voice like thunder. Now I wonder who that could be speaking of, and look at verse 6. A voice like thunder saying, I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 active powers here saying, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that you don't hurt the oil. Did we show the one where it said these wars are about oil? The kernel. Okay, praise Yahweh. You saw that. All of these wars, all the money we have spent, he said, is for the oil. Make no mistake about it. We want that oil. We don't want our life, our way of life altered in any way. We've got to have that oil, and if we can have the oil, we'll have the power to run our machinery, fly our planes, to destroy nations, destroy our enemies, quote, enemies. Do not hurt the oil and the wine. Well, here now we see richness throughout the earth. Riches throughout the earth. Over here now, before that, he shows that these 4 powers are given power to take peace from the earth. And then look at verse 7 now. And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living, active member say, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him that sat upon it was Death, and Sheol, the grave, followed with him, and power was given to them over a fourth part of the earth, to kill with the sword, with hunger, and with the pestilence. The same is under the authority of the beast. Well, now, if you think back here now, if the mark of the beast, that was the first book that I wrote, was the mark of the beast. And I showed what the mark of the beast was, and of course I showed these prophecies at that time. The beast that he's speaking of here was the one that changed Yahweh's laws, spoken of in Isaiah 24, also in Daniel, to change the feast days and the laws. So, now this too is part of the curse spoken of by Malachi, because in keeping these laws from being heard, if a person don't know righteousness, how could they possibly make a decision not to do evil if they don't know anything about the other side? Well, of course, Yahweh says, teach your children diligently these laws, statutes and judgments. Deuteronomy 6:25, 6 verse 7. Teach them diligently when you rise up, when you go to bed, and so forth. Well, of course, this is what we're doing now. But why are we doing this now? Because Yahweh established His house again. That's why we're teaching them diligently to the children at this time. You realize how many thousand years it's been since this was done by any group of people? The so-called American Indians, they brought some of this with them when they were fleeing, like we saw here earlier from this Holocaust. They brought some of the laws with them, and they brought the name with them to what is called the United States today. There's bits and pieces of it brought, but not the whole thing. And it was never set up in any way that I know of to where the House of Yahweh actually had the power to teach children day and night the laws of righteousness until this time period we're in right now. In verse 7, I heard the voice of the fourth living saying, come and see. Then verse 8, and I looked and behold a pale horse, and the name of it that sat upon it was death. So we see that they're wanting death to 4/5 of this earth's population, starting in that area right there. I don't think they think, as Malachi Martin said in his book, The Keys of This Blood, the U.S. hopes to come out on top, which means the plans are made for this right here. This is not a new thing, depopulating the earth. And Malachi Martin showed this. And Malachi Martin showed the ones they hope to kill off. They don't want, as he said, anyone who will refuse to worship the Queen of Heaven. Satan is going to make war against them. Well, so far, in all of our money that is spent, we have attacked those who will not accept Mary. Quite a coincidence, huh? And of course, he said, Malachi Martin said, showing in his book that this was going to begin shortly, and the plans were made, and each one of these nations hoped to come out on top, including the Pope. The Pope is one of them that hopes to be a winner in this. He's not, according to prophecy, he's not, but he hopes to be the one on top ruling all the world. Well, a fourth part of the earth to kill to kill until 4/5 of the earth's population is dead. Look on down to verse 12. And I looked, and when he had opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. Well, you're going to see this darkness over the whole earth the next time, not with a dust storm, but with the darkness that blocks out the sun and the moon too. And, of course, stars falling from heaven. The powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then he sees the heaven departing as a scroll here. This is going to take place very soon. Why should we doubt this when we see the first part already fulfilled? Why should anyone doubt it? You know, we see that this first part here in Revelation has been fulfilled. We see why they're doing this. Hurt not the oil. They're doing it to save the oil, but they're also doing it. This power is given to them, which means they've made a decision to follow, and they have the power to do it, capable of doing it, to depopulate the earth, to bring it about. Look, this is what we're going to do, he says in verse 8. We're going to bring this about, the killing of all these people about. Now that's what he's showing you, and this is part of the curse of the 4 horns that Yahweh had put in front of all of Israel, saying to them, this is what your sins is bringing. It's bringing death. And this is what it's going to bring in the last days, shown in Revelation, shown by the prophets before Revelations too. But he says the heavens were darkened, and then they were rolled back as a scroll, and the kings of the earth, verse 15, and the great men and the rich men and the chief captains. This is surely speaking of the great 8 and the great 28 and the great and the great 10% that own 99% of the wealth. The mighty men and every bondman and every free man sought protection for themselves and in their governments and in their assemblies, the assemblies of the gods, and the houses of their gods that they were following, the war gods. Yes, this is the war gods that they're following. And said to the houses of their gods and their assemblies, fall on us and protect us from the face of him who sits upon the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Well, of course, the Lamb is not wrathful at all. He's not angry about anything. In fact, he's coming to teach them now. The great day of his judgment is come. Great day of his judgment. Now let's go back to Malachi again with that in mind. Malachi 3. And look at verse 9 again. He says, you're under this curse. The curse, yes, the whole nation, the whole world, everyone who is turned against Yahweh, whether you're beings in heaven or whether you're beings on earth. You're classified here and mentioned here in this word, Hebrew word, that they translated nation or nations. It's heathen. It's people who don't know the ways of righteousness or refuse to follow the ways of righteousness. For you have robbed me, that is, robbed the source of knowledge that would have kept you from this hell that you're bringing forth here on the face of the earth in this time period. And then he tells you, bring all the tithe into the storehouse that there might be food, that is the means. That don't mean something to eat. It doesn't mean food that you eat, but the means to spread this message out to the world. And prove me now in this, says Yahweh, I would give you all the things that you're lusting for, all the rightful things, as the Jacob, he spoke on this. And he says, he talked about this curse. And he says, why the wars? Because you're lusting for things that you should not lust after. And he said, you're refusing to ask for the things that is actually needed. Well, that's what Malachi is saying here. He says, I'll rebuke the devourer in verse 11. The thing that destroys, I'll rebuke this. Let's go back also now to Genesis 49. Genesis 49. And we see here, for verse 1, this is to take place, this curse in the last days. And in verse 7, we see, cursed be their anger. So furious. Their fury is cruel. And I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them throughout Yisrayl. Throughout everyone that's going to take place, this is going to be dispersed and become the greatest horror on earth. The anger, the cruelty, and so forth. I think we're pretty much seeing it right now. Verse 11 now shows, let's look at verse 10 first. That was verse 1. Now look at verse 10. And he says now here, he talks about the scepter. The scepter will not depart from Yahweh. Now, if you see what is really taking place here, he's saying that Yahweh here is going to actually remain a distinct nation, separate from the other 11, if you want to put it that way. But they would remain separate, and they would hang on to this, and they would keep giving these laws until a time period. And this is what took place in the temple. When Moshe was read, well, of course, this is what brought it forth. Yada, the distinct tribe, brought this forth in Jerusalem, in the temple, until Yeshua came. Now that's a fulfilled prophecy that no one can deny. And when the critics come saying, this is a bunch of baloney just written by so-and-sos, they admit this is true, and they have no excuse. They have nothing to say back to it. Yes, it took place. Yes, just like it said. And Yada did become a distinct tribe here until Yeshua came, and then, of course, they were gone. Find them today. They're not given the law today anywhere. And then we see here, that the lawgiver, Yada, that somebody else supposed to take this scepter. Now, this is like the dictionaries. You can't go to a dictionary to find out what this is, but you can find what the scepter is by following what the prophets say about it and what the apostles say about it. It's a breeding program right here that he has specified is going to take place, that's going to breed total righteousness into one man. Now, it brought it to some others. It brought righteousness to families. They had to guard the breeding program and make sure somebody else didn't get into it, to defile it. Like the man that took his father's bed, went into a concubine. Now, that is also in the world today. That mixture is in the last days more so than ever, and of course this is what's causing all the confusion that we see taking place in the world today. The confusion. Their minds are confused, otherwise you wouldn't have the hatred taking place that you see prophesied there in verse 7. The hatred and the laughing about it. And wanting to kill and thinking nothing about in protecting their oil. Do you know how many children were available when those bombs hit the ground? Did you ever think about this? What kind of heart or brain does it take, knowing here is the city now, we're going to drop a bomb on it, knowing, and they actually know the population of that city. They know how many women, how many children, how many men, how many soldiers, which are few. And when this was taking place in Egypt and in Libya, did you notice the hatred there in the minds, in the faces of the people? You can see it in their faces. There's no love or sympathy or caring or concern. They didn't even give them the opportunity to get the children out of the way. They did back when the big boy and little boy or fat man was dropped. The first two atom bombs, they actually cared enough at that time, the president did, to send out planes ahead of time, dropping brochures telling them what we're going to do. Get your children out of here and your women. Those who don't want to die, get them out of this city. We're going to drop these bombs on your city. Now you can see how this changed from that time till now. Do you see any caring at all in the world today? I don't see it. I don't see it anywhere except now I'm seeing bits and pieces of it, like I said, in the news, the articles where they're bucking up against the system now, and they're saying, no, we don't want this taught in our schools. Well, of course, they have war taught in certain schools, and there's no way they're going to change that unless enough people bucked up against it and said, we don't want these colleges in America anymore. We don't want war taught to this people. We want peace taught here, and we want it throughout the earth. Well, my time is up, but just look there just a little bit more. He says the tribute. Well, of course, Yahshua proved to be that one that it was built in his mind. This was his crown. He is crowned with this, and this is an eternal crown that is placed on his head. It's an eternal crown that you're being prepared for too, brethren, for you to be recognized as Yahshua, righteous, who won't turn in a fit of anger or a bad moment, low blood sugar, whatever you want to call it, and zap someone with your power. You know, you're being proven now, and I can see you're overcoming. I saw this at the feast, and Yahshua saw it before the feast and showed me that donkey in the cloud, a magnificent sight that I'm jumping up and down about. And then when the article was told to me this morning about the people, because I've been looking for this, and about the people rejecting this so-called education, and they showed. Now these people, this is quite lengthy article, but these people are saying, no, this education that you've got is not working. Diseases are increasing, STDs are increasing, but cancer, heart disease, everything is increasing, along with your education. So your education is to blame for this. We don't want it anymore. We want abstinence taught to our children. I remember that George Bush. Now he's a family man, and you can if you have a family and you love the family enough to correct it, like the judge that was spanking his 15-year-old daughter in a proper place, I would say. I saw the belt and where it hit her, and I'd say that's a proper place to put the pain that will get to the brain. and let her know that she's not going to do that as long as she lives in this house. I think it was a great thing. But when I see this, I was rejoicing this morning, and you probably heard me hollering, "Praise Yahweh." Maybe the wind was carrying it the other direction and Clyde was hearing it. But to me, these things are really joys. After I finally realized what this donkey cloud, that it didn't just happen. When I first saw it, I thought, well, that's really strange. Like Mary, the appearances of Mary in a cloud, because clouds move. But then I looked at that cloud, I stared at it, and I said, man, this cloud's not moving. Oh, there it is. We got it on the screen for you to see. Praise Yahweh. Technology. And I said, this cloud's not moving. It went into my mind, the cloud is stationary. And I said, this is not real. And then I saw the pack on the back, well, if it was a cloud, why this much details? If it wasn't for a purpose, why this much detail? The only thing that puzzled me for so long was the cloud in front of it, and I thought it was looking mean at the time. I thought this cloud in front of that donkey, well, maybe it is looking mean. But the way they painted this cloud, they had it in rolls like it was moving. I said, no, it's not like that. It was black, and I said, if you'd take a picture of a night of oak trees, the black, you can see it. If you take a picture, you'd get the same color and texture that I saw in that cloud. So they painted some more. Our artists were working night and day trying to get this. I said, we got to have this before Passover. I see what it's doing, what Yahweh has done. But then I saw the picture. After a while, I was working one night, after a few weeks, and I was working one night, and I saw this picture that our television technicians, Kohan Eliah and his crew, the ones that has got overseas set up, well, they're doing all kinds of work now, and news and everything else. But I saw this picture of the olive tree sitting on top of the sign. Do you have that one? Can you show that one? This is great technology. I want to go with this thing. Well, anyway, I said, that's the shape of that cloud, that olive tree that you see up there. And I called to find out who put that up there, and I said, this cloud, this olive tree is the shape of that cloud that the donkey is staring at. Well, after all of these times, all these weeks of concentrating and remembering this and praying about it, I can see that this was done. And of course, if you see the sun underneath, that's the way he fixed that. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a dawn coming. Look at it. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, that's the work that we see prophesied right here with Yahshua, who was bred to receive, to actually grow in his mind, to take over his mind, to take over his total mind, this righteousness, which it has. So he was one, absolutely one with Yahweh. And then his donkeys, having their full attention, as he did, he only lost one, he said, out of the bunch, the son of perdition. But they too, he put into their minds the same thing that was bred into him, he put it into them. And then in the last days, he shows yet another prophecy here of another work. Now, the commentators all know that this is a separate work and a distinct work from all the others that has been prophesied. They just don't know who. but they do know that this is a separate work, and they admit that in their writings. The historians do too. And there's many people have looked forward to finding out this in the future, and they will, because Yahweh is now bringing this prophecy to pass. And in the world that is also going into starvation and war, they're bringing this prophecy to pass. And I think I told you one time that food is not going to get cheaper. It's going to get higher, much higher. And they're cutting it down to where they can control the food. And of course, this gives excuse for actually killing more people. Start a war so you can wipe them out. You don't have an excuse to wipe them out unless they do something. And they cause you to do this, see? Like the 9/11. They had to have something to make them go after this oil in Afghanistan or in Iraq or in Libya. There was a cause for it. And of course, the 9/11 was it. 9/11. Someone called me last week and said, did you look at the date today? And I said, no. What is it? And I don't remember now. I'm going to have to bring that to you next week. But it was magnificent because I have a number. I have a number. It's not 9/11, but it's 11 something. No, that's not it. I'll remember. I'll get it, and I'll have it for you next week. It's really beautiful, really beautiful. May Yahweh bless your understanding. I love you, brother. I love you, sister.